Hello there, welcome back to Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode 173. And with Memphis and Florida meeting tomorrow night for the NCAA final, men's basketball, I thought it was fitting to go back in time to a time when this thing they call March Madness now actually was finished in March. They didn't call it March Madness back then, but we're going back to 1979 for a classic matchup. This takes place at the Special Events Center in Salt Lake City. And of course, it's Indiana State versus Michigan State, Bird versus Magic. We're using player of the game basketball from Downey Games. Now, this is not a play-by-play type game. It's more of what I would call a spreadsheet or a stat generating type of game. For brevity's sake, I've already determined the players for both teams, and the way you do that, we'll take a look at Indiana State. There's a game column here, and you roll percentile dice, D100, and if the number for each player is whatever their game rating number or less, they play in that game. Rules state there's a minimum of 7 players per team with a maximum of 10. So I've done the rolls and recorded the statistic ratings for rebounds, assists, and scoring for both teams. Indiana State does have 10 players who appear in this game. Michigan State has 9. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is determine the target score for each team, and that comes from this column here. Now, Indiana State, that's a 17, but you see there's a slash and a 9. What that means is on a roll of a 9 or less, that 17 increases by 1 to 18. So they roll a 1, so Indiana, and I suggest using a pencil with this game. I did use pen for this part, but there might be some erasing you have to do. So anyway, Indiana State's target score becomes 18. We'll do the same for Michigan State. 15, actually theirs becomes 16. So their target score is 16. All right. So what you have to do here is total up the scoring ratings for the players that are in the game and compare it to the target score. So for Indiana State, we have 9, 11, 13, 15, 16, 17. 17 is their game score. For Michigan State, 7, 10, 12, 14, 15. 15 is their game score. So we take the game score, compare it to the target score, and we have to make those equal. So in this case, the game score for Indiana State is 17. Their target is 18. So that means we have to increase their scoring rating by 1. So we're going to roll a D10 and determine which player is going to get that rating. And it's 10. That's Bob Ritter. So he gets an adjustment of 1. Okay, we'll do the same for Michigan State. Now, their game score is 15 with a target score of 16. So they are also going to get an increase of 1, and it's going to go to Greg Kelser. So he gets the adjustment. So the first part of this is getting an adjusted scoring rating. So Larry Bird, 5. So I'm just going to go down all of these, and I keep breaking a pencil point here. All right. I'm just going to go down through all of these and record their adjusted scoring ratings. And this will come into play in a little bit when we start tallying scores. Okay. Now the next thing is to make a defensive adjustment for each team. We'll start with Michigan State, or excuse me, Indiana State. Indiana State has a defense of a +1, so that means we have to adjust the scoring once again, and it's going to be a 1 roll. So because it's a +1, someone on Michigan State's going to get their scoring increased over here in the defensive column by 1, and that will be Rich K. So he gets a 1 over here. Now, Michigan State's defense is a -9, so that means we're going to have to roll 9 times and adjust accordingly Indiana State's score. So I have 5 D10s here, and we're just going to go down the line like this. Okay, so that's an 8. So that's Turner gets a -1. A 9. Nemsek gets a -1. A 2. Carl Nix gets a -1. Another 2. So that makes Nix a -2. Another 2. So now he becomes a -3. And you'll see how this all works out when the tallying takes place. -3. And the last one is a 7. That was a 7. And that's Steve Reed, so he gets a -1. Okay, so we've rolled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We need to make 3 more defensive rolls for Indiana. So we get a 4. Bob Heaton gets a -1. Another 4. That makes Heaton a -2. A 7. Actually, I don't remember if I rolled that or not, so I'll roll it again. It's a 1, so that's going to be Larry Bird getting the -1 there. Okay. So now we can do the tallies. And what these numbers mean in the scoring range is it means how many 10-sided die get rolled for each player. So the rules state you start at the bottom of the visiting team. Now, although this is at a neutral court, excuse me, we have to, just for game's sake, have to select one team as the visitors. I went with Indiana State because they wore the dark jerseys that game, so I'm assuming they were, at least for scoring purposes, listed as the visitors. Okay, so we start with Bob Ritter. All right, so he has a 1, so we're going to roll 1 die for Ritter. Okay, and that's a 2, so he gets a 2 there. So we're to alternate between home and away teams. And you should even them out. So what we're going to do is we'll be evened out after this roll. All right, so Rich K gets a 0. So he does not get a roll. Okay, but that will be adjusted later in the game. So that's his roll. Next is Nemsek. He's a 0. Then we go to Greg Lloyd, another 0. Then Scott Turner, another 0. Gonzalez, another 0. Steve Reed is a 1. So Reed gets a 1. And then we go to Terry Donnelly. He gets a 5. Brad Miley gets 1 roll. He gets a 9. Mike Brokovich is a 2, so he gets 2 die. Now, a 0 is treated as a 0 unless it is applied to the player in the number one slot, and then it becomes a 10. So, of course, for Indiana State, that's Larry Bird. And surprisingly, for Michigan State, it's not Magic Johnson, but Greg Kelser. So anyway, the 2 rolls here for Brokovich are an 8 and a 0, so he gets an 8. And we'll say 0 because he got 2 rolls there. All right, so now moving on, we got Leroy Staley. He gets 2 as well. He gets a 6 and a 9. Ron Charles for Michigan State gets a 6 and a 4. Bob Heaton for Indiana State, 2 die. It's a 6 and an 8. Jay Vincent, he gets 3. Gets a 6, 8, and a 1. 6, 8, 1. Okay, next is Alex Gilbert. He gets 2 for Indiana State. He gets a 9 and a 4. Now Magic Johnson, he gets 4. So we're going to roll all the black and white ones here. And Johnson only gets 8. Now, because he's in the second slot, these 2 zeros are treated as zeros, so he gets a 5 and a 3 for a total of 8. All right. Next we have Carl Nix. He also gets 4. He gets a 2, a 7, a 3, and a 6. Okay, and lastly is Greg Kelser for Michigan State. He gets 4 die, so he gets an 8. A 5, a 4, and a 3. And the last one will be Larry Bird. And he gets 5. So we'll use the black and white and the red. All right, so Bird gets a 6. A 7, a 2, a 4, and another 4. Okay, and there's going to be some adjustments made to this based on the defensive reductions or additions. Okay, so there are some optional rules that I'm not using. One of them is game pace, that you can see is listed for both teams here. Both teams have a pace of, there's a couple of reasons I'm not using pace. Both teams have a pace of A, and so I think that kind of cancels out. And plus the pace ratings in the rules refer to home and away teams, and since this is a neutral court, I'm just going to call that a wash, okay? I'm also not using the transfers, because you can do scoring transfers to move points from starters to bench players and vice versa. I'm not using that. That's also a optional rule. So we're just going to go from here. I'm sort of doing a hybrid between the basic and advanced games. I am going to use strength of schedule, though, because I think that is important. So we look at Indiana State's strength of schedule is a 33. Michigan State's a 41. That's a difference of 8 favoring Michigan State. So then we go to this strength of schedule table, and on a difference of 8, Michigan State, gets a point adjustment of 2, because it falls in the 6 to 10 column, or row rather. So I'm going to roll 2 die, and using the defensive column, because there is not a strength of schedule column, I'm going to add 2 points, 1 to 2 different players, or it could be 2 to the same player depending on these rolls. So we got a 2 and a 4. So Magic Johnson's going to get a +1, and player 4, Ron Charles, is also going to get is also going to get a +1. Okay, so now we're at the point of the game where we're going to tally points. And just like doing the recordings, we'll start at the bottom. So first for the visitors, Bob Ritter, he gets 2 points. So we're going to record 2 here for them. All right, then we go over to Rich K, he gets 1. We'll record that there. Nemsek, nothing. Lloyd, nothing. Turner, nothing. And even though they have these -1s here, you can never have less than 0, of course. So Lloyd gets nothing. So does Nemsek. Scott Turner, nothing. Rob Gonzalez, nothing. Whoops. They shouldn't be there. Nothing, nothing. All right. So we go to Steve Reed. He had 1, but with a -1, that becomes a 0. And then we get to Terry Donnelly. He gets 5. So we'll mark off 5 more points for Michigan State. Now back to Indiana State, Brad Miley. He gets a 9. So that takes them to 11. Brokovich gets 8. Puts them up to 14. Staley gets 15. And that's going to take them to 26. And we go to Ron Charles. He gets 10. 6 and 4 for 10, plus 1 additional for 11. Gets them to 25. Now to Bob Heaton. He gets 6 and 8 for 14, minus 2 for 12. That gets them to 38. Indiana State. Jay Vincent, 6, 8, and 1 for 15. That's going to get them to 40. We got Alex Gilbert, 9 and 4 for 13. It gets Indiana State to 51. Then we go to Magic. 9 points for Magic Johnson. And that gets Michigan State to 49. Carl Nix. 9, 12, 18, minus 3 for 15. And that'll take Indiana State to 66. High-scoring affair. And then lastly, Greg Kelser for Michigan State. 13, 17, 20 points for Kelser. And that gets them to 69. Michigan State. And lastly, Larry Bird, 13, 15, 19, 23, minus 1 for 22. And that gets them to 88, which is a bit ridiculous if you ask me. So based on this scoring, bucking history, Indiana State wins this one 88 to 69, which is a bit surprising to me considering the -9 defense of Michigan State. But that's the way the cookies crumbled in this one. Now this game, as you can see, is basically a stat generating type of game, which could probably be used to supplement a season replay you're doing with a certain team to get some stats and results from teams that you're not doing the replay on. As you can see, I went through this pretty quick. Now you also can, and I will, tally up the rebounds and assists, and I'll just use Bird for an example. So Bird's assist number is a 0, and all you do is roll 1 10-sided die and add the assist rating to it. So Bird had 22 points, 3 assists, and his rebound number was 9 and 15 rebounds. Whoops. Three assists, 15 rebounds. That's why I suggest using a pencil. And you would do that for all the players, and you can generate at least points, rebounds, and assists, the 3 big ones. Of course, it does not keep track of fouls or minutes played or anything like that. But one of the other things it does allow you to do, if you were doing a season replay using this game, and there are pro seasons out there. In fact, I have the 75, 76 NBA, or excuse me, ABA set. This can actually get your minutes based on these game rating numbers. You know, like players like the top 7, I guess, for Indiana State played every game. So, of course, that's why they show 100. The same with Michigan State. Instead, it's only 5 players. But anyway, you can't do a season replay using this, and this game rating will kind of even things out with the minutes played by the bench players versus the starters, and at least generate relatively accurate stats. I'm a little surprised at the scoring. Bird got a bunch of good rolls, the 6 and the 7, and only losing 1 on defense. And there you have it in a replay, the 1979 NCAA Men's Basketball Championship that took place on March 26th, 1979 at the Special Events Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. We had Indiana State defeating Michigan State 88-69, so 19-point victory, which is very surprising, but that's how it came out. So if you're with me for this short one, I appreciate you stopping by, and I'll be back again in the near future with another video. And until then, take care.